Just as a reminder, you can visit us at thepandapod.com. That's thepandapod.com to grab our RSS feed, listen directly, and share PandaPod with your family and friends. You can also reach us directly via email through podcast@thepandapod.com. Thanks for listening.
Ever felt like you're wandering through a world that doesn't quite fit? Like you're a square peg being nudged into a round hole? Maybe you've caught yourself gazing up at the stars, pondering the mysteries that seem to slip through the fingers of conventional wisdom. Do esoteric beliefs resonate with you more than everyday chatter? Is there a voice inside you whispering that there's infinitely more to this universe than what meets our 3D eyes? If any of this sounds familiar, if any of these questions stir something deep within you, then you might just be the alien we're looking for. This isn't about being from another planet. It's about feeling like you're out of place in this one. It's about believing in the extraordinary, the spaces between. So tell us, do you feel that call, that pull towards something, somewhere that defies the ordinary? If so, welcome. Your mothership, Hot Alien Summer Camp, is calling you home. Are you ready to answer that call? To step into a space where your unique beliefs aren't just accepted but celebrated? Imagine a place where the extraordinary is the norm and the mysteries of the cosmos are the evening's main topic of discussion. A retreat where every workshop, every activity, and every shared meal is an opportunity to explore what lies beyond our conventional 3D experience. Did you find yourself nodding along just then? Feeling that spark of excitement at the thought of connecting with others who share your curiosity for the unknown? Then it's no coincidence you're hearing this right now. This is your invitation to join us, to become a part of a community that doesn't just ask the big questions, but revels in them. And what's a gathering of aliens without a little interstellar entertainment? Prepare to laugh with beings who understand your humor, as we bring you live comedy from Cosmic Minds of Ryan Singer and Paranormal Karen Rontowski. Their insights and wit are as boundless as the universe, promising an experience that's as enlightening as it is hilarious. So, if you're ready to leave behind the world of round holes for a place where every square peg finds its place, a Hot Alien Summer Camp awaits. From August 8th through 11th in Lebanon, Tennessee, we're not just creating a retreat. We're forming a constellation of like-minded souls, each shining their unique light. Are you one of us? Are you ready to explore the depths of your alien soul among friends who understand that it's time to beat 'em up to Hot Alien Summer Camp? Your space in the cosmos is reserved. All you need to do is claim it. Visit HotAlienSummerCamp.com. Pre-sale tickets are on sale now. Let's embark on this cosmic journey together.
Welcome everybody to this newest episode of the Panda Pod, Thoughts Expanded. Today we're going to do a little bit of politics continued. We're going to talk about different political parties, different political ideologies, and the similarities and differences between them. When we talked last time, we had a couple things that, we just kind of wanted to dive more into, right? So we wanted we just really want to dive deeper into them. That's all it is. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Rab had some kickoffs for us here. So Rab, what were you thinking around this?
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to mention just is that where the terms left and right come from. Do you guys know this?
I don't. I have no clue.
I mean, yeah, it could be up and down for all I know.
No. So well, I mean, obviously the original words left and right, I don't know where they came from. I'm talking about using that to describe to people's political ideology.
Can I take a guess?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Does it have something to do with like the left hand versus the right hand of God and like what those represent?
That would be awesome though.
Okay. Because like I think the right hand of God is supposed to be like justice and the left hand of God is supposed to be like empathy or something like that.
Interesting. Well, I mean, obviously, I guess in a way you could kind of say that like people's right and left brain probably informs like a lot of things, So I mean, it kind of seems tied in with that in a way. Like if you're just talking about like purely at a subconscious level, But I guess what I'm talking about is the first terms, those terms were used for like ideology, right?
Okay.
I'm thinking maybe it goes back to baseball.
Nope.
Like the first time there was a left-handed pitcher, right?
Nope. Not that either.
Oh, okay.
I mean, obviously lots of people throughout history were left-handed, and that was like an uncommon thing and like even a hated thing in the past. But by the time that this terminology came around, people had kind of stopped fighting left-hand people sinister. It was the French Revolution, actually. So during the meetings of after the revolution occurred, and they had already killed the king, and they were having parliamentary meetings to basically decide what they should do. It just so happened that they eventually devolved into two ruling parties, and one happened to be on the left-hand side of the place where they sat, right, the parliamentary hall, and the other happened to be on the right-hand side. And obviously, at first it wasn't quite like that, but people sat together because they, wanted to sit next to people that they thought they were end up voting with, right? So literally, which side you were sitting on had to do. I mean, that did not necessarily say who you were going to vote for, but it did signal that somewhat, right? And they of course, even in a two-party system, there are some like outliers, and like there's people who have different ideas about what they should do. There's cliques, right? And so those outliers would tend to be on the left or the right of the room. So that's why it sort of made sense to talk about those things in those terms. So that is where the terminology originated from. And I use that to kind of say that effectively today it has a meaning, right? But it's purely a cultural meaning, right? It's purely contextual to your current moment in a way, right? Like the broader meaning of left and right is based on where you are and what you personally observed in terms of politics, because obviously, like the original definition isn't a definition; it's literally just like where they sat in a room. Total coincidence.
Huh.
It's kind of like a telephone, right? Like it's just something that changes over time.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
So yeah. What I kind of wanted to take the conversation was like kind of more of a definitional one, and just try to define maybe what left and right mean. Maybe we'll try to define what they mean, so that way, like we can be on the same page about that, I guess. Because I think to me it seems like there's such meaningless words, or there's such terms with almost entirely individualized meanings. You know what I mean? That's the reason it makes sense to me to try to agree on what an actual definition is before we have a conversation about them.
Okay. Where do we start with that?
One thing I was thinking about was like, stating, like if we talk, last week's conversation was entirely about American politics. So, I mean, like sticking to that makes sense for me, right? Like we're not talking about the globe necessarily. We're talking about, we're operating in the framework that left and right offers, which is your local moment. So what I was trying to think is like, who would you guys say the leader of the left and the right in the U.S. are today? I mean, obviously they don't have like a strict marching orders leader, right? But if you had to pick one vibes based, who would you say is the leader of those two, like, I guess movements or something?
So let's make a clarification on, we're saying today. So we're not saying like historically over the past 20 years, we're saying today.
I know.
I mean, this obviously that terminology to us has a certain meaning, and we've been alive for roughly the same time. So if you wanted to reach into the past to kind of, like, I don't necessarily have a particular definition in mind, especially in this context. Like, they're almost entirely impossible to fully define, right? Based on where the words came from, and like the fact that the meaning is so tied to where you were at in history, right? So to me, it makes perfect sense to reach into the past, that at least like our living past, right? To point to certain people and say, okay, that was a leader of the left at the time,
Okay.
or leader of the right. I mean, I guess I have some preconceived notions. You want me to share those? Because it seems like we're not. Okay. I mean, I would say that today, the leader of the left in the U.S. is probably Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the leader of the right is probably Trump. If I had to point to one.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's where mine was going as well. Like, I was like hesitant to say Trump at first, just because like it feels like there's probably someone in the background
Sure.
who really controlling things. But as far as like the visual,
Yeah, exactly.
leader,
But yeah, AOC doesn't have a lot of power either, right? So I mean, in a way, you could kind of think like there clearly are people who have power over her. She's not the boss, right? But
right?
she is someone that you can point to and say that is a leader, right? Same with Bernie Sanders, right? But I would just say that he's kind of like on the decline to some degree. He's pretty much.
So when you say left or right in this situation, are we talking the far left and the far right? Because
Well,
I do think
yeah,
AOC would be considered the leader of like the far left.
no,
I think there's a lot of people in the Democratic Party who would argue that she's not like the leader of the Democratic.
certainly not. Right,
Yeah.
right. What I would say is that when I say this, when I say leader, I don't necessarily mean that I or anybody who is like a quote leftist has to respect her either. Like, I really do not have much respect for that person, but I also do think that she is someone who's very central, and like that's someone you can point to and say that is somebody who is like on the left.
Sure. So kind of like last time we were talking, you could almost say they're like avatars of those
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
the side of the spectrum. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, do you guys have different opinions about that stuff? Like,
So I can't just say like, to me, there's inseparable parts currently of each side, right?
Sure.
Like so I can't think of just like somebody that's like, okay, like the leader of the left or the leader of the right. That may have been the case 15 to 20 years ago. That would have been really easy to do.
who would it be 15
You could have said, you could have said, okay, like Bill Clinton, leader of the left. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't anybody that was like, okay, right? Now, because we have the more extremist sides and they're a lot more visible than they were before, I think that each the left and the right have two separate people. Like somebody who says, yes, they're left, but they're not radically so.
Sure.
Or they're right, but they're not radically so. You know, like, so let's take the right, for example. So the difference between those two is Mitch McConnell and Trump.
Sure.
Right. So you would say that Mitch McConnell is definitely right, the leader of the right for a long time. But Trump is also the leader of the more populist extreme version of the right.
Sure. Maybe leader is the wrong word because it sort of implies boss, but like I'm really not trying to imply boss here. I would say certainly Mitch McConnell has more power than Trump in this world. But I would consider him not the leader because maybe as much, it does seem like he kind of tries to put himself out there, but like, because I mean, we have heard of him, right? But he's not like, I don't know, he's certainly not charismatic, right? And I think maybe
leader's the wrong word, right? So we're talking about maybe avatar, like Jeff would say, right? Like the face of. Yeah. So then on the left hand side, I'm seeing faces. Okay, yeah. So on the left hand side, I'm seeing Nancy Pelosi as that more middle left, right? That more traditional liberal, whatever it is. And then I'm seeing people like you were talking about, like AOC and Bernie Sanders on the more extreme version of the left. And then just to be completely fair, there's also like, it's something like 45% of the country and growing is actually independent, and they're mostly all middles, right? So most of the middle of the country, like if I'm just trying to think of somebody who fits in there, that's where I'd look at, like, well, right now there really isn't anybody, but if I had to say, okay, who kind of has both sides of the argument here, I'd probably point more towards like RFK, right? Like, he definitely in the middle, both sides, he's got something there, right? So, but that's how I see the spectrum at the moment. Like, even if I think left, I think of two different people at least.
Sure. I think you've stumbled on something useful there, which is that, if you compare like AOC to Nancy Pelosi and Trump to Mitch McConnell, you sort of have a similar parallel. I certainly consider both Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell to be to the center of the spectrum compared to Trump and AOC. I think where I mostly disagree is the idea that the majority of the people in the U.S. are like also in that center, I guess. And I think I could point to evidence is like, at least just based on vibes, like if you see if you think of those people, like, do you really think about them as representing people, or do you think about those people as like effectively unelected tyrants? I mean, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. I mean, they're elected, but not to the full extent of the power they have under these roles,
Exactly.
Elected them as representatives, but, it's the representatives who named them and gave them all the other power. So.
Yeah, and they also, they have a lot of control over their own local election, too. At that level of operation, like, they have ways to make sure that they can win. So, I mean, in a way, they to me, it's like, that's the part I take issue with, is the idea that the vast majority of American people are sitting in the same bucket as those two. That's how I feel about it. So, like,
I don't think that's not really where I'm getting. I think the change off is, so when I say that like 45% or whatever of the country is in the middle, what I really mean is that they're independents. Right. So they could flop either side or whatever the case may be. But generally speaking, they're more in the middle than those two are.
Sure.
Right. But they may just be, most independents are mostly single issue voters too. So the single issue voter is just going to pick the side that runs with their thing. Right. Whether that be weed or firearms or whatever it is that they're talking about, right? Like, they're going to pick that side. So
yeah, I guess I'm not trying to say that the people in the middle aren't like open-minded or like, actually I would say independent people, because I still kind of take issue, like, if you're setting up a left-right spectrum where AOC on one and then Trump's on the other, like mainstream political figures. To me, it still doesn't make sense to me to call the majority of American people in the middle of that. To me, I think that that in order to really figure out where they are, you have to at least have two axes, and like one of those axes has to be like how much power they actually hold, or something along those lines, right? Like, because I think that's the main difference between like Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and the majority of people. I mean, that's the most obvious difference, is that the majority of people are not in power. So at the very least, like, that distinction has to be made. But I feel like there's something beyond that, and I don't know that maybe I can't quite grasp at it yet. Maybe we still need to kind of talk this through.
I think the thought that comes to mind when we're talking about this, and we're talking about how different people align in different places on this spectrum of politics, is populism plays a big role,
right?
And especially in current days politics. We kind of wax and wane on that, depending on what's going on and with the country, right? Like,
Sure.
There will be a really big populist president, and then we won't really have that for a while, and then something crazy happens, and we've got another one,
Right.
So I think delving into that a little deeper, I think it really tends to show that I don't think most people really actually identify the way that they think that they do
Sure.
with a political party. I think realistically it's okay, so we've had these two parties for so long now, especially for everybody that's alive. The parties have been going since everybody that here is in their current state has been alive. So that's all we know, right? And so you have to take in also the history of a specific party when you're thinking about how you're going to vote on something, right? Especially for something like a president. So it's a lot more complicated. There's a whole political science degree, right, for a reason. But yeah, I think that's the other thing to
One useful distinction to make, I think, might be the distinction between rhetoric and action, too, right? Like, realistically, what Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi are doing is nearly the same thing. They say
100%
very
the
different
same.
things. But obviously, what they're actually doing day to day is nearly the same. So to me, what's like when I think about the majority of American people, like as in the middle, the disturbing thing to me is like, what makes that difference? Like I almost feel like the left-right difference when it comes to the people who are actually in power is like a tiny little universe, and then the actual universe is like really big outside of there as far as like what political ideologies there are, and like what most people believe in their heart, I guess, is what I'm kind of saying. Like, not necessarily what party they're going along with. Does that make sense?
I think so. Like, can I make it kind of an analogy to the way that like people currently are waking up to the way they view gender?
Sure.
Like it's such a huge spectrum that it's almost ridiculous to try and put labels on it.
Right. Yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like there's two, like you can point to some really strong polls and say that those are something. Like there's something there, male and female in the gender analogy, right? Or like, I guess in the U.S. politics is Democrat and Republican, but like where those actually are in the vast sea is fairly hard to place, I think, maybe.
Right. Do you foresee there being a future in which like politics becomes more kind of how we're starting to view gender? Like, do you see a future where like it feels silly to call someone a Democrat or a Republican, and instead it makes more sense just to, I don't know, explain what they believe?
I mean, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
We can only hope.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like...
I see a movement that going that way. There is a movement for independent thought and actually sitting down and investigating things, and I mean that's a trend that's been growing, especially in our generation, right? We learned like we can't just trust everything that's being thrown at us. And so we wake up really early when we smell a hint of bullshit, right?
Sure.
Like we have to go and make sure we know what we're talking about, because our friends will call us on what we're talking about. You guys do it to me all the time.
Sure.
So I already know that this is a thing you have to do. And we all do. The difference is I don't have enough young people in my life to know whether or not they're doing that.
Sure. Sure.
or whether or not they're taking everything in mostly face value. I don't know. And I'm not going to pretend like I know, because it could be either, it could be both. Who knows?
You spend any
But-
time like questioning or worrying that they're doing one way or the other? The youth.
Well, there's a difference between what social media shows, right, based on trends, and what actual people are doing,
Sure.
Right.
right? So social media trend would have you believe that they don't pay attention to fuck all because they don't care, right? But there's also, like, I do know, like, I have a nephew, I have a couple nephews who are getting that are closer to that 20-year old age, who do investigate things that they think are interesting and things like that. So I think I think it really just depends, like we're saying, about where you fall on the spectrum. Like, you may not even know. It could just be all different. I don't know.
Sure.
But I think there's a lot of people smelling the bullshit and trying to figure out what the real information is. And I think that was spurned on by the pandemic and the Twitter files and all that kinds of stuff. And people are starting to realize that the government's doing a whole bunch of shit that they shouldn't be doing. So, yeah, I think there's there's momentum growing that way. I don't know if we'll get there. Maybe the younger generations will get there. Maybe Gen X and below will get there. Boomers definitely aren't there. They just believe whatever hand is thrown at them, right? Like,
Sure.
or whatever it is that they're saying on Vox. It's like, that's just how it is, because they don't have the time, the energy, or the know-how to figure that stuff out. So,
Well, about trying to think of where I was going to go from what you just said. Have I lost it?
I know I say a lot. Was it the
back-
Spectrum stuff?
Just a little bit. What?
Was it the Spectrum stuff like Jeff was talking about?
Yeah, but no, not quite. I was just kind of I was going back a little bit further than Fox News, but I think I might have lost it. Hang on one second.
Yeah, I lose shit when I hear Fox News too.
That Windows recall feature.
Oh yeah, really.
Bro.
Hey Siri, what was it we were just talking about like 45 seconds ago? Can you tell me? No,
That's a whole tangent we can go down later. We probably should.
Episode altogether. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if we run out of stuff to talk about in this one, I mean, that would be a totally awesome transition. Honestly, hey guys, you want let's get some rage about Windows for a while. I feel like I had something actually on topic to say though, and it had to do back to like where Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell are sitting compared to everybody else. I guess what I was here's what I was gonna say. Here's what I was gonna ask actually. Like, how much do you think that the current, like, if you just look at Main Street politics, how much do you think that the left-right spectrum is actually fabricated? Like, when I was talking about the differences between Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, like, I feel like literally right there, it certainly is fabricated. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
I think
I think there's just a lot of talk about what people are doing and very little action. Like promises, like empty promises. That kind of like vaporware almost.
They say things that they know they won't do, and those are different things. But those two people fully understand that they won't do them, and that those two people fully understand that there is not a difference between what they want to do. In my opinion, at least. Maybe there's some differences in like who their donors are, and like some minor, like this family should get a little bit more power or something like that, like tweaks around the edges. But what they actually, like, day to day, like how they think the country should be run, to me, is the same.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, so like then the interesting question is, right, where does that break down? Like, I mean, it's obvious that there is some kind of difference between AOC and Trump. Like, like you can't say the same thing about them for sure, right? That they literally in their heart believe the exact same things about how the country should be run. Like I think you could say that it certainly breaks down at that level. So like as far as like if you take away from what they believe and like just go with like what would they do if elected president, like I mean even then I think you could say that like AOC has some sort of meaningful difference from Trump. I mean we've seen Trump govern, and you could say that AOC presidency would certainly be different from that. Like it's not, it wouldn't be the exact same. So like there is some useful difference between those two people, but not between Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. Like that's kind of what I'm trying to like suss out here. Like where do those guys sit compared to them? And I just feel like it's not quite extreme. Like it's not just that those two are extreme edges of something. You know, that's like I don't know. I'm probably getting horseshoe theory, I guess, is where I was going to go next with this. Like maybe we could talk about that some. Like at least to me, that does like horseshoe theory at the very least. Maybe I should say what it is. The idea is that if you think about left right as a strict spectrum with one end on the other, and you know one end on one side, the other side of the other, right? Horseshoe theory is the idea that they bend towards something. The two ends bend towards each other like a horseshoe, and therefore there's some commonality between the left and the right that's meaningful and worth talking about. And to me, one thing I really think is important about the horseshoe theory is that it does put it into at least two axes, which I think realistically, right, it is like the gender spectrum, like Jeff's saying, right? There's a million axes, right? Actually, like if you truly did create a model of like everything, you could like a fully complete model of politics, it would be impossible because there's so many axes. Like there's an infinite number of axes, basically, right? But like even if in a world where there's an infinite number of axes, two is a lot better than one. It's twice as many. So like that's one thing I think it brings to the discussion is that second axis.
So then, is there a like point at which in adding new axes that it just feels unintelligible or something? Like,
yeah,
because two is obviously better than one, but is 50 just like unusable? You know, like unrealistically usable?
I mean, I think maybe in some ways it breaks down at 3 or 4 for most people. I mean, probably down at 2. I mean, you barely hear people talk about more than just the left-right spectrum in a way, right?
True.
So, I mean, I think once you start thinking about, especially in more than 3 dimensions, that's where things really start to break down. Like if you're just trying to have like a mental map and like, am I close to this person? You know, and then you kind of have to start talking about like individual issues, right? Like, do I agree with you on X? Do I agree with you on Y? Right?
Talking about it in dimensions really kind of makes it a little easier to conceptualize why it just becomes so difficult to, you know, measure it free. You know,
a scatter chart doesn't quantify it. That's the problem. Like, so you can take tests and like there'll be a chart, right? Like here's Mahatma Gandhi and here's Trump, right? And here's everybody in between and whatever the case may be. And you have like you'll take a test and they'll give you a scatter chart of where you sit on these two different axes. But it's not true because the individual issues themselves can put you partly over here and partly over here. So I mean, you can get more generalizations, but, and that's really what it comes down to. It's, okay, so this, especially in America, right? It's like the right stands for these things. The left stands for these things. And there's 100 of them on both sides. Sure. So which side is mostly covering the majority of my issues? They're more likely to do something about those things that I care about, even if there's a couple of those that I don't care about. And we even talked about that on the personal level when we're talking about a president, right? They may cover 4/5 of what I'm trying to get, what I would like to see get accomplished with the country, there may be one thing that I don't care for. But
Right.
the trade-offs, it comes down to trade-offs. So that's why that 3 to 4 dimensional really makes it more legible, I think.
Right. I think a couple things you said are really useful. Like one is the idea of Trump being on one side and Mahatma Gandhi on the other. I know that was just an example, but it really does put into perspective like how framing the question, how much that has an effect on the answers, right? Not that obviously not that when you take a political compass test, you're like, going in that Trump's going to be in one place and Mahatma Gandhi's on the other, and you shape your answers accordingly. Like, not like that, but like the fact that the people that design the test think of things in that particular way. I mean, if you think about Trump and Gandhi in like an infinite space with a bunch of different possible vectors of like overlap and difference, right? Like, framing the problem like that almost chooses what your axis is going to be, right? Because you have to put everybody in between those two in a way, right? So I think that's one thing. And the other thing was when you were talking about like what, 50 different issues or something like that, like that really brought to mind I wonder how. Like when I was thinking earlier about the differences between like Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi and the majority of people, I think that probably, Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi agree on like 98% of those issues or something, right? And the majority of people agree on 98% of them as well, and are just have the opposite opinion. Like maybe not the majority, like maybe not like all people or whatever, like maybe there is some, I mean, obviously, like, not all people agree on all the same issues, but, like, I think there is, like, a big, like, poll somewhere out there that has the majority of people kind of, like, circled around it, and it happens to have many, many, many of the opposite opinions of how Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, to pick on them, think we should run the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where that center that I was talking about comes in, because even though they're going to pick things from both sides, it happens that way, especially if you're informed about what is going on. If you're not informed, I don't think it applies. I don't think the center thing applies, because you're really just picking who you think is a better leader at that point, or whatever it is that their main thing is that they're trying to get done, that they're pushing is the right thing to do at the moment, right? Like, people are busy. People got work. People got kids. People are married. People got other things that they're interested about. Most people don't have time to sit down and read through the bills and read through what people are actually saying or proposals and what's going on. Most people have 5 minutes where they're either scrolling through TV and they hit on ESPN or Fox News, they hear the thing, and that's the thing that they know but don't actually know anything about.
Sure.
And so that's where I think, like, yeah, there is a middle there, right? But I don't think those people are the real middle. I think it's the people who look at everything, decide what the trade-offs are, and then say, okay, I see the left's point, I see the right's point. There is somewhere in the middle there where I actually believe, or maybe I believe one side or the other, but that doesn't mean I agree with them on everything. And actually, most things I don't.
But you're saying this is a small number of people, because we said, I mean, I think I agree with you. The majority of people are getting an opinion from, like, somewhere, like a cable news channel, potentially. Like, maybe not quite, but I mean, at least at one time, the majority of people were getting that way.
I mean, it could just be friends groups at this point, like just your friend group. We talked about that before too.
Social circles.
Right. Your social circles. I mean, one person actually does watch Fox News for an hour every night, right? And then you go to breakfast with them, and that's all that they're talking about for the next hour and a half.
Sure.
Or
especially with,
and it's littered with stuff they posted while, watching.
Facebook or right. And that's majority the older generations that are doing that, right? Now, I will say that younger generations aren't also prone to the same thing, because there's lots of times, especially within the past decade, where it's bandwagon jumping. Like, I'm jumping on like the Israel side, right? I'm jumping on the Palestine side. I'm jumping on gender issues, right? I'm jumping on whatever it is that's the thing that you have to say so that you don't get in trouble by your friend group, right? Like that's also a thing.
Right.
So yeah. I don't think it's age specific. I think it is just something that happens to us as humans because we're very tribal.
Right. Yeah, I think that's true. I also think, like, kind of going on what you were saying, I think the majority of people in this country that are Republicans or Democrats, like, that identify in that way positively on purpose, like, I think that they are effectively doing it like it's almost like a cultural thing. Like, it's not it like, I think that in some ways those people are Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell-esque, like, in a way, right? That they are very I don't know, like, they both, like, they both tend to think the other side is, like, really, really bad. Like, they do buy into the idea that they're, like, those people think there's a huge difference between Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, and yet they are in the same boat as Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, that they have the majority of the same opinions, and those opinions happen to be the ones that they share with Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, like, at the heart of it almost, Like, I think that's something to be said too. I think that the people who are old and are, like, watching Fox News or CNN or whatever all the time have that same, like, they think the difference between Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi is important, both, and they also have, like, they think they have this really strong difference with their neighbors, like, who are just basically just a different culture almost, right? And that they think that difference is meaningful too, but it really is not when it comes down to, like, what their opinions actually are.
Oh, I was just going to say they're all evil. That's just what I was going to say. I mean, they're and we kind of tipped on this the last time we talked about this, which is where the majority of their donors are the same. Right. And like, so it doesn't really matter. And for the longest time, they just kept kind of bouncing back and forth, not really any change, maybe a little bit over a long period of time. And that really worked for the people that were in charge. And so, because they don't have to try to predict something that's different than what they've had in the past, so everything's more predictable. Stock market's more predictable. It's just everything. Stability is more predictable, right? But the problem that they're having now is that we're going through a populist season. I actually think it started with AOC. I think her being elected was not something that they counted on, not something that they wanted, not something, because she gained a lot of power immediately when she came into Congress.
Right.
I think that's been stifled a bit by them since then. But they were not counting on that. That was a distraction, like a big distraction for them. And then all of a sudden they had three, right? They had, like, the power team, and they were outspoken, and they will not follow the rules. And I think that's where it started from. And then Bernie was just like, okay, if that's how we're doing it, I'm going to ride this wave. Sure. And he did. He rode that wave hard. And then Trump rode the wave all the way to the White House. So.
Well, Trump was elected before AOC, wasn't he? I'm pretty sure just chronologically he was, but I could be wrong about that.
I'm pretty sure it was AOC. I'm pretty sure it was AOC first.
She was elected. She assumed office in January 3rd, 2019. I know it seems a little wild.
And Trump's 2020.
No, but Trump came
No.
to the White House in 2016 the first time.
2016. Yeah.
Yeah, the last election was 2020.
That doesn't seem right.
No.
That doesn't seem right at all to me. Did I just get it completely backwards? Did Bernie start it and then it went Trump and then AOC?
Well, Bernie ran in 2016 against Hillary, right?
Right.
And Hillary was the person who won the primary, and then Hillary went against Trump in 2016 election. Trump won, and then Trump was defeated in 2020, which is why we have Joe Biden today, and there's about to be another election, right?
Man, I'm telling you, that Large Hadron Collider is messing with my memory. Man, it's messing with my memory hardcore.
I'm gonna
That's
be
not what
honest.
I remember.
For a sec, I was with you. Like, it really does seem like, I mean, things since Trump's election certainly have been like really different. Obviously, like that really changed something. But I don't.
maybe it's maybe it's COVID,
Right.
because COVID definitely fucks with time. Like that
Everything
entire
that
portion,
happened, it's like forever ago. Yeah.
it feels like forever ago, and I feel like it was yesterday that we were really dealing with that shit.
Sure.
And it wasn't. It was fucking 2 years ago. Was like kind of getting towards the end of it.
Right.
Like it. I think COVID was because of the LHC. I'm just gonna come out and say it. It wouldn't have happened. That's an alternate reality. COVID. They hit it, and then we went into the timeline where COVID was. I think that's what's happening.
Say hello to
I think
my LHC, Little Helper COVID.
That got Jeff back into the conversation. He heard the conspiracy and was like, "Yeah."
No, I've come up during this conversation. I've come up with the perfect system of government.
Okay, let's hear it.
Go.
Every year on election day, people don't go and vote. They sit down and take a very long survey. Okay, and that survey helps determine what it is they do care about, what it is they don't care about, and what they, want to hear about before they make a decision. Okay, and then everything that they do not care about, they do not have to vote on that year. Only the people that care about it have to vote on it. People they do care about, they specifically do have to vote on it. Things they want to hear more about, they can opt into like notifications on their phone to, tell them, hey, this is happening, this is happening. And then whenever an issue comes up that needs to be voted on, everybody just gets a prompt on their phone. They vote on it. And we don't have any leaders anymore.
Yeah, that sounds really nice. Direct democracy, that would be great.
Here's the argument that you're going to get against that. And the only reason why I know that is because I've had so many conversations where I want the exact same thing that you just said. I want all of the issues just to be voted on by people without having a representative who doesn't represent anybody and just, whatever it is for their own interests are in charge of our government. However, what you're going to hear is that there's way too much volatility in that in order for it to be functional. Like there has to be something, some process, somebody in charge of some things in order for them to be stable.
Sure. Yeah.
This is an artificial intelligent run timeline that I'm talking about.
That's
okay. Let's go. But that's the big argument that I hear. And I understand where they're coming from. To a degree, I agree with them. But I also don't think what has to be in charge is people, which is kind of what you were saying, Jeff. Like if we have an AI that could make sure that the system runs the way that the people want it to run without actually destroying the system.
Imagine that we just ditched the idea of money altogether, and all of the world's available resources were available in a database, and an AI could just be like, "Oh yeah, I can divvy all this up appropriately, and we can take care of everything. Let's see what everybody wants," and sends out prompts to everybody to vote.
Where am I going to put all my cobalt?
Your cobalt That's in line 4,273,000
On the blockchain.
No, column 72. Yeah, that's where Colt lives.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you said that was the main argument against it, because to me, if I had to point to the main argument against that system, I would say that it would be that it would actually be those same people who like get their opinions from Fox News or CNN. Like, if
Sure.
we have a system like that today, a lot of people would. I mean, a lot of people regularly do vote against their own interests, right? So, like, if it was individualized and you couldn't really follow one ticket, like, that might make things worse. Like, if that would one today.
What is that experiment, though, where, like, you know, you have 50 people and they have to guess the weight of a cow, and, you know, they get pretty close, but as soon as you get, like, 1,000 people, they pretty much nail it within, like, you know, a couple ounces how much the cow weighs. Like, wouldn't that, like, do the trick too? Like, if enough people are doing it, if everyone is doing it, then it's going to balance out. It's going to weigh out.
Sure. And I guess a system like that, it would encourage people to pay more attention to individual issues, right?
Yeah.
And that, like, even if a lot of people, like, just decided they didn't really care and mark down whatever, or, like, they looked up where, like, some, you know, Democratic Party, like, how to vote or whatever, like, a system like that would at least encourage some people to think about it. And then once some people are, and they're talking about it, maybe more people will actually start thinking.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe if there's, like, a ban, sorry, this is going to get really anti-free speech here, but a ban on, you know, political whatever on news, or, you know, whatever. I don't know. Not necessarily a ban, but just, like, a requirement that if you make a statement, it has to be quantified by, like, some kind of backing data, you know, or you are penalized, you know.
A lot of countries actually have a ban on campaigning. So I don't know of any examples off the top of my head, but there's certainly, like, if you look up, like, England's laws on campaigning, or, like, Australia's laws on campaigning, like, I'm not sure that these two countries are in the bucket, but I know a lot of countries have, like, you basically can't start campaigning until N weeks before the election. Weeks, not years, right? Like we have in the US. You have to start, like, at a certain time, and before then you can't talk about your, like you can talk about your opinions on, like, how current votes should go, but you can't, like, start pushing yourself as a candidate. You know what I mean? You can't run ads and stuff like that, right? So, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily along the same lines as what you're doing, but I do think it's totally reasonable to think, like, okay, to make a system work, you do have to kind of put some kind of potential limiters on exactly what the news can be at certain times, you know, at least, like, I don't know.
I like the direction this conversation's going, but it's really not where my mind was starting at with all of it. The idea behind that system would be that everyone would see all of these things that they do not care about.
Right.
And, and, like, all of a sudden, you know, there could be, like, a good solid pruning of things that, you know, that either don't matter or can be hand waved, and, like, really focus time on those specific issues that people, you know, are so divisive among people, and find solutions to them.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I think the other problem that we have currently, I'm gonna switch back over to the tangent because I like the tangent. So one of the things that I think is important when you're talking about, like, you know, like, a news outlet, right? Talking about whatever an issue is and giving a spin on it and whatever the case may be. I think so just in case people don't know, a news station is not legally bound to tell the truth. And so they don't. And they're allowed to give whatever their, like, talking heads are allowed to give whatever their personal or paid for position is on an issue. And so you're not getting an unbiased readout of, or even summary with like, okay, we do this and this happens. We do that and that happens. That's not a thing anymore.
Right.
It was never a complete thing in the country, but it was a thing. That's the reason why CNN wasn't originally considered as like a specific platform. They spent a lot of time with their cameras in Congress, right? Like that was what CNN was. You got to see who was voting on what and why and what their opinion on was it. That's what it was. And it was the same thing for things like the debates, right? Like there wasn't a slant towards them. It's just, this is what's happening now. This is what you need to know about what's going on now, without it being a left or right issue or a up or down issue. I'm not talking about the candidates. I'm talking about the actual news stations.
I just don't know that I've ever watched a debate that didn't feel biased in some way. Like,
well, not a recent one.
But have you watched debates from the past, Wiggy?
Listen, yeah.
And sure. Like, when was this like mythical time period where debates weren't being like skewed one way or the other? I feel like. So you think that there were like
before Ross Perot?
You think there were like some legit debates going on during the Reagan era, and
yeah, I do. I actually think that they were mostly fair debates where the two candidates talked and they gave each other the time to talk. They didn't interrupt each other.
Sure,
that's what the thing was.
I will say, I think what you're saying basically is that like the norms have changed, which I think is true. Like I do think the norms around debates have changed. Like that's not like I think
but that wasn't my main point.
Right.
Like my main point was the news, right? Because that's what we pointed out was the news, right?
Right.
So, you know, if we can get to a place where we enact laws where they're not allowed to tell false statements. I'm not talking, but like the only problem there is kind of what you said, Jeff, where you're talking about, okay, well, who gets to decide what's a false statement?
Sure.
Right. Yeah. So that's where it becomes fuzzy, but they should in good faith attempt to tell the truth without having some spin on it.
So I wonder, like, maybe we just take like a particular example. Like, well, what I was thinking about when you were talking about was how when Obamacare was being talked about, when it wasn't a thing yet, but they were working on it, there was a lot of outrage on the right wing about like death panels and like people deciding who. Do you know about this?
Yeah, about people deciding, like people on the health board deciding who does and does not get their things cut.
Oh yeah.
And like basically saying like some random bureaucrats are going to vote on whether your grandma dies or something, right? And I mean, the reality is, the bureaucrats don't even know your grandma's name, and they're deciding whether or not she's going to live.
Right. Yeah, there's no panel going on here. Yeah.
Right. But either way, right? You can kind of look back at that, And I guess what I'm trying to say is obviously that was pushed on the TV as something that was true, and that was a natural consequence of what Obama was doing. And that certainly isn't true, whether you like Obamacare or not. I mean, it's only true in a sense that, like, yes, executives are deciding, making policies that are harmful, but it's not like there's a grain of truth in there with the death panel idea, but not. Like, clearly it's literally wrong.
Right. Misrepresented, for sure.
Right. So I was thinking about, like, we don't have laws against saying false information, but you do have laws against slander, right? So, like, you can't, like, someone can still sue and say, like, that isn't literally true about me, what you said, right?
It depends on who you're trying to sue.
Right, that's true.
Like, if you're just a person... Like, so we're on the podcast right now, right? Like, so if we started going off about somebody and, you know, we're telling lies about them and we're trying to damage their reputation, right? We're trying to damage their reputation in the greater world or industry where they work or whatever the case may be, they could sue us. But we're also not officially some giant corporation syndicate. Like, people try to sue Fox News all the time.
Sure.
One in maybe 5,000 of them go anywhere and get settled before they even go to court. So it's like, yeah, you can, but it depends on who you're trying to sue. Like, if they sue us, we don't have anything to give them.
Sure.
Like,
exactly, right.
you know, like the podcast just goes down, you know, but if you're like, okay, I think I have a case against CNN or Fox or NBC or CBS or whatever the case is, like, you might as well try it because you might get a settlement out of it.
Well, I guess what I was trying to say with the Obamacare death panels example is that, like, slander laws don't prevent you from lying. Like, you're not, like, no one was slandered. Like, it's not slander against Obama to say, like, this policy would lead to X, even if it's not true. Like, even if you know it's not true, it's not slander, right? That's kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah, I think if we remove the ability for opinion, right? Like, you should say, okay, like, yes, this could be an outcome, and you move on, right? You don't sit there and talk about it for 20 minutes like it's the main point of whatever the bill is, right? Like, I think that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, give the facts. Just don't linger and pick and choose on the ones you want to linger on. Like, you've got to tell the full story.
Sure. Well, anywhere else we feel like we wanted to take this?
There was some more we wanted to go. Was it the LHC stuff? Was it
Microsoft? You guys want to spend a little time blabbing about Microsoft? I feel like that's not a full episode.
I don't really have anything to say other than I think the recall idea is really creepy and directly out of the second episode of Black Mirror, and I don't like it.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, look into that. Google search Microsoft recall. That's your homework for the week.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest reason why I think they're going to have to pull it, or they're going to have to prevent the feature from being used on corporate machines, because otherwise they're just doing what every AI company and everything else is trying to do right now, and just mine data.
Sure.
And that would give them information, just so much information into what companies are doing,
right,
and things like that. Like, it's in government, like, they're going to have to turn it off for government. It's only going to be a thing that you use. And I mean, everybody looks at something they're probably not supposed to look at.
Sure.
Like, right? Like, they're just gaining dirt on everybody in case they ever have to arrest you for any reason or want to.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
I would be
forget that.
not supposed to with saying, like, would be embarrassed if any human found out about. Yeah, I mean, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
isn't it inevitable that people will find a way into other people's records?
Sure.
Like, it's inevitable, right?
well, once we mix AI with supercomputers, we're done. Like, that's just all about. And there is no more security. It doesn't.
Honestly,
security doesn't exist anymore.
The whole AI supercomputer thing is the one, like, positive I potentially see coming out of this. That being that if Microsoft is somehow able to capture and analyze the actual work of millions of people, like how people really work, if computers can crunch that information, I think that would be a huge jump forward, like a huge leap forward technologically.
Well, good news, Jeff.
I think it's so scary. I don't want it to happen.
So good news, Jeff. Microsoft is building miniature nuclear reactors so that they can power OpenAI's chips. So they're going to have unlimited power to do that.
At least they're going clean with it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
You know, we're a few years away from fission anyway. They won't even get those things like christened before they have to build a whole new kind of reactor.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, well, they're going for it. So,
I mean, that's been a thing for a while. I mean, people were like, in China, didn't like somebody build a dam to power a Bitcoin farm that they had? Like,
well, in China, here's the difference. And this is something I recently learned. So the difference between the China and the U.S. and the AI wars. Okay, so China has all the power they could ever need. They've gone full on nuclear. They have plants everywhere. They have all the power that they need to run the infrastructure. The US has the opposite problem. We have all the chips, but not enough power to run the data centers the way that we need them to run in order to scale. So it's becoming a matter of who, like when you talk about who's going to get there first. The US has the advantage because all we have to do is build power, which is something that's easy to do, relatively speaking, to come up with new technology for chips. So there's an advantage there. But China can just steal the shit that we make when we make a model. When we come out with a new model, OpenAI's model is fucking open source within a year. And they just take that. So they don't have to develop or train a new model. So they don't need as much energy. So depending on how you look at it, we're kind of even. China's maybe a year or two behind. But to that point, the original point, that's why Microsoft's building nuclear reactors to run AI.
Sure. I just did a quick Google search of like where all China's energy came from. Because I was really hoping what you said was true and that they had a majority of their power coming from nuclear reactors. But I mean, I don't know if you said
no. I'm saying specifically for AI.
Oh,
specifically for AI, most of it's nuclear, not the whole country. That's mostly coal.
Yes,
if I think correctly. So,
yeah,
but specifically for their AI, their data centers, they're running.
Huh. So it is interesting to think about why that might be, like why people are using nuclear to power AI. Like, what's the idea there? Like, why not use coal power?
It's like limited bandwidth. It's the bandwidth problem. Like, there's only so much energy you can put out with coal.
I see.
Whereas with
on the amount, like in a certain area.
Right.
Okay.
So it's localized. Right. So with coal, you've got to move the thing from one place to the other place and make sure you've got it, blah, blah,
Sure.
blah, blah, logistics. Whereas having a nuclear power plant 5 miles away from your data test center is completely different.
Sure.
Because you have, the power output is so much higher and you can do it for so much longer on a sustained level than you could with coal, especially if there's some kind of issue with logistics.
Interesting. Okay. Huh.
I was gonna say, I guess that makes sense because I have heard that like in order to build like a Jupiter brain computer, you'd have to have like a Dyson sphere around a sun to power it to have the power you need for it. I guess I've never really thought about how like truly massive supercomputers are going to take a lot of power. I guess I've never really considered that before.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, to me, it seems almost like, not necessarily in a conspiratorial way, but just like kind of like in a metaphysical way. Like you're putting the brain next to something, like you have a dedicated power center to run just the brain. Like it's almost like you can almost see something being born in a way.
Yes.
So, I mean, to kind of bring it back full circle, like I was trying to think about like when you guys started talking about AI, like my mind jumped back to Jeff's direct democracy system where an AI is managing everything. And like Windows Copilot, like to me that, or not Copilot, but the recall feature, right? That almost seems like it would almost have to be a normal part of that society. Like not saying in terms of like it would be required, but just in terms of like if the AI is that powerful, like privacy is meaningless in some ways, regardless of where the like invasion of privacy comes from. Like ideally it wouldn't be the Microsoft Corporation, but like like society as a whole, like in that society where an AI really is in charge, like almost like society as a whole needs access to all of your information at all times for everybody.
Yep. And that's something that tech really wants, so that like some tech companies really want that. Other tech companies don't want that. For example, Meta doesn't want that because their entire business model is based off of selling information, right? Whereas a company like Google, they just get all the information naturally, but they don't have access to everything that they need access for. So if they were allowed to just open it up and grab everything, the sky's the limit, right? Yeah. So there's going to be a fight where there's going to be a fight there. There's going to be a 5-way fight there. Not just between different groups of tech companies, but also people, right? There's also going to be people. There's also going to be the government that's in charge that is going to pretend like they're going to do something to protect people, but that's not right. Why they're really doing it. They're doing it for a completely separate reason, right? So we're going to get to that fight eventually, and we need the right people in the right places to sort out that battle and come to a good spot. I don't know if we have that capability. And I don't think we have the right people, and I don't think we have the right system to judge that, because ultimately all of that stuff winds up in the Supreme Court. And because there's no accountability in the Supreme Court, and you can't do anything about, you can't get them out, right? Like, it's really, really difficult. I think there's like one way to get them out, and it's like never been used, right? So it's kind of like, where do we go from there? Because if we had a way to like no confidence about out justices that we think are doing the wrong thing as a people, to be perfectly honest with you, if the people could vote on the justices instead of Congress voting on the justices, we might be able to solve the whole problem, all the problems.
Right.
But because there's no real check and balance anymore, which are checks and balances are just gone. Like, presidents just sign their pen on whatever they want these days, and they get away with it. And then Congress takes them to the fucking Supreme Court. But whoever's got more, whichever side's got more people on the Supreme Court, they win. So it's there is no checks and balances anymore. It's all the same people.
Sure. I think to summarize what you're saying, like, I agree. Like, I think the Supreme Court is one of the major, like, abusers of justice in this country, to say the least. But I think, like, in a way, I kind of use them in my mind as almost like an example. If we were to change that system, it would be at the same time as many, many things changing for the better. You're talking about left-right spectrum, you're talking about whatever, right? Like, kind of to tie it up, like, we're almost leaving this in the exact same place we left our last conversation, which is like, when things change if things are to change for the positive, like, that's a large change, and it's almost all-encompassing,
Yeah, I do think it would be the linchpin, though. I think if that was the thing that we got out of all of the other things that we got, that would be the thing that we could potentially make the most impact on the system to make incremental changes.
Well, I think if we do a part 3 of this conversation, it would definitely be about, like, the possibility of reform. Because I think that's a very interesting question. Like, could you change the Supreme Court and then fix everything that way? Like, I think that's probably maybe where we should table it and come back. Like, I don't know that I necessarily disagree with you, but I really do want to explore the question of, like, what is possible through reform, what is possible through other means, like, at least how you guys feel about it. I think if we do a part 3, that's definitely where we should go.
Yeah, I would love to have that conversation, for sure. A little homework, if I get you guys to do it. Can I get 8 hours of your time?
We're not watching the show, Jeff.
Because, you know, it'd be really,
We're
you
not
know,
watching the show.
Mrs. Davis really kind of falling in here.
What's it on, Jeff? I'm gonna watch
Peacock.
it. What's it
On
on?
Peacock.
I don't have Peacock.
It's free with ads,
I don't-
buddy.
I don't
I'll
have
send you.
that streaming.
You can watch it ad free, completely
No.
legally. Wink, wink.
Yeah. I don't pay for back streaming services. So
Now that you've said I can watch it ad free legally, or sorry, ad with ads legally, I may actually do that. I did not know Peacock was free. I thought it was a paid service.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's
yeah,
free
I'm
with
pretty
ads.
Sure, it's a paid service.
And this podcast has been brought to you by Peacock.
Peacock.
No relation to
Dun,
Our
dun,
relationship
dun.
with Peacock.
We're talking about an actual peacock. His name is Sam Ewell.
Yeah, he pays us in feathers.
Signal to
He's so sweet, honestly. You guys,
Yeah, and
you'd love him out there.
they're so pretty. They're so colorful. You know.
All right,
He's
well-
a good guy, Samuel.
We've hit our Joe's quota now.
Yep.
Yeah, it always happens at the end. That's why you got to listen to the end, folks. All right. So thank you guys for jumping on it and listening and to us ramble about our country a little more. Like you said, I think we're gonna pick this up on our next episode. So keep a lookout for that, and we will see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.